The Voice of the Revolution, the story of Ayatollah Khomeini. Chapter 1. The Boy from Huain. In the quiet town of Huain, nestled in the heartland of Iran, a child was born in the year 1902. His name was Ruhollah. From a young age, Ruhollah was drawn to books, prayer, and the whispers of justice that echoed in the wind. His father, Sayyid Mustafa, was a respected cleric, but fate was cruel. When Ruhollah was only 5 months old, his father was assassinated, his life taken because he stood against injustice. Raised by his mother and aunt, Ruhollah grew up with a thirst for knowledge and a heart shaped by loss. He would often sit with the local clerics, asking questions that seemed too deep for a child his age. People in Huain began to say, "This boy will one day lead." Chapter 2. The Scholar's Path. At the age of 19, Ruhollah left Huain to study in Iraq, and later Qom, the spiritual heart of Shia Islam in Iran. Under the guidance of Ayatollah Abdul Karim Hayari Yazdi, he immersed himself in Islamic jurisprudence, philosophy, and mysticism. It was in Qom that he began to write, to teach, and to rise in stature among religious scholars. But Ruhollah was not like other clerics. He believed that religion should not be confined to the mosques, it should guide society. He saw the increasing Western influence in Iran under the Pahlavi dynasty and grew restless. In his heart, a revolution was growing. Chapter 3. Rise of a Rebel Cleric. By the 1940s and 1950s, Ruhollah Khomeini had become a respected teacher. But it was in the 1960s that he became a public voice against the Shah of Iran. When Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi introduced the White Revolution, a series of modernization reforms, backed by the West, Khomeini opposed it openly. He criticized the land reforms, women's suffrage, and especially the growing American influence. In 1963, on the day of Ashura, Khomeini gave a fiery sermon. He compared the Shah to Yazid, the tyrant who killed Imam Hussein. The speech ignited protests. The regime responded by arresting Khomeini. That night, protests erupted across Iran. Blood was spilled in the streets. Though released months later, Khomeini had crossed a line. The Shah sent him into exile. Chapter 4. Exile and Awakening. For the next 15 years, Khomeini lived in exile, first in Turkey, then Iraq, and finally France. But distance did not silence him. From the quiet town of Najaf, and later the village of Neufville-le-Château, near Paris, he dictated messages, recorded tapes, and sent letters to his followers in Iran. These cassette tapes became weapons, smuggled into Iran, played in mosques and homes. They inspired millions. In his words, people heard dignity, faith, and a challenge to tyranny. As the Shah's regime grew more oppressive, the voice of Ayatollah Khomeini became a symbol of resistance. Students, workers, and clerics all looked to him. The revolution was no longer a dream. It was coming. Chapter 5. The Return. In January 1979, after years of protests and mounting unrest, the Shah fled Iran. On February 1st, Ayatollah Khomeini returned to Tehran. Millions gathered at the airport. They waited for the man who had led them from afar. His return was both spiritual and political. He was greeted like a messiah. In a country broken by years of dictatorship and inequality, he offered a vision, an Islamic republic based on justice, morality, and the rule of God. Chapter 6. A New Republic. After the triumphant return of Ayatollah Khomeini in February 1979, the Iranian monarchy collapsed. Within days, the military declared neutrality. April. A national referendum was held, and an overwhelming majority of Iranians voted to establish an Islamic republic. It was a decisive moment in history. Khomeini declared, "Let the people decide their destiny under the guidance of Islam." With that, Iran was reborn, not as a monarchy, not as a Western-style democracy, but as a theocratic state led by a supreme religious authority, Vilayat-e-Faqih, the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. Khomeini was appointed supreme leader, the highest authority in the land. The constitution was rewritten to reflect Islamic values. The westernized laws of the Shah's era were replaced with Sharia. Many celebrated, while others feared what was to come. Chapter 7. The Trials of Power. The early months of the new republic were chaotic. Secularists, liberals, communists, and nationalists, many of whom had helped bring down the Shah, began to voice concerns about the direction Iran was heading. But Khomeini was resolute. He believed that the revolution belonged to Islam, not to political ideologies. Opposition newspapers were shut down. Activists were arrested. Revolutionary courts handed down harsh punishments. Khomeini viewed dissent not as a challenge to his authority, but as a betrayal of the divine cause. One by one, competing voices were silenced. Khomeini told the people, "We did not make a revolution to have a democracy like the West. We made a revolution to bring the rule of Islam." To many devout Muslims, it was a time of spiritual revival. To others, it felt like a new kind of tyranny. Chapter 8. The American Hostage Crisis. On November 4, 1979, a group of radical Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage. They accused the United States of plotting against the revolution and demanded the extradition of the Shah, who was receiving medical treatment in America. Khomeini supported the takeover. He called it the Second Revolution, a blow against imperialism. The crisis lasted 444 days and severed U.S.-Iranian relations for decades. Inside Iran, anti-American sentiment soared. Crowds chanted "Death to America," and murals across Tehran depicted the U.S. as the Great Satan. The revolution had found its enemy. Khomeini's image became even more powerful. He was now not just a religious leader, but a revolutionary figure on the global stage. Chapter 9. War and Sacrifice. In 1980, another storm struck Iran. Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein invaded, hoping to take advantage of Iran's post-revolution chaos. What followed was a brutal 8-year war that claimed over 1 million lives on both sides. Khomeini called it a holy defense. He rallied the youth to fight, promising martyrdom and paradise. Even young boys were sent to the front lines, carrying plastic keys said to open the gates of heaven. The war united Iran temporarily. Despite economic collapse and international isolation, the Iranian people fought with fierce devotion. Khomeini refused to accept peace unless Iraq admitted guilt and paid reparations. It wasn't until 1988, after nearly a decade of bloodshed, that Khomeini finally agreed to a ceasefire. He said, "Drinking from the poison chalice was more bitter than death." Chapter 10. The Veil and the Sword under Khomeini's rule. Iran became a deeply conservative society. Women were required to wear the hijab. Music was banned in public. Morality police patrolled the streets. Western culture was purged from the media. Yet, at the same time, Khomeini promoted literacy, religious education, and social justice. He spoke of the poor and the oppressed as the true inheritors of the earth. He established charitable foundations to support martyrs' families and rebuilt the country from within. His rule was marked by contradiction, harshness and compassion, repression and idealism. For many, he was a saintly figure. For others, he was the architect of an unforgiving regime. Chapter 11. Fatwa and Fury. In 1989, Khomeini shocked the world again by issuing a fatwa against British author Salman Rushdie, whose novel The Satanic Verses was seen as blasphemous. Khomeini declared, "I call on all Muslims to kill him, wherever he is found." The fatwa sparked international outrage. Western governments protested, embassies were attacked, and bookstores were firebombed. The incident showed that Khomeini's influence extended beyond Iran. He had become a symbol of Islamic defiance against Western liberalism. The message was clear. Khomeini saw himself as the defender of Islam, no matter the cost. Chapter 12. The Final Days. By early 1989, Khomeini's health had begun to fail. He had spent much of his life in spiritual discipline and political struggle, and his body was worn. As he grew weaker, Iran held its breath. On June 3, 1989, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini died at the age of 86. His death brought millions to the streets in mourning. The funeral became one of the largest in human history, with millions of Iranians weeping, shouting, and praying. The casket was carried through rivers of people who cried out, "Khomeini is not dead, his path continues." The supreme leader had passed, but his legacy was just beginning. Chapter 13. The Legacy. Ayatollah Khomeini's revolution changed the course of history, not just in Iran, but across the Muslim world. He proved that religion and politics could be fused in a powerful way. He inspired Islamic movements from Lebanon to Nigeria. In Iran, his system, the Islamic Republic, remains intact, led by a supreme leader. Though challenged by reformists and international pressure, Khomeini's vision still shapes the nation. His supporters remember him as a man of God, a voice for the oppressed, a spiritual father. His critics view him as a dictator cloaked in religion. But no one denies his impact. Khomeini once said, "Our revolution is not just for Iran, but for all oppressed people." Even now, his portrait hangs on walls across Iran. His speeches are taught in schools. His voice is still heard in the prayers of the faithful and in the slogans of protest.